Hello everyone and welcome back to the Captain DevOps YouTube channel. Today we'll be taking a look at our next module in the AI 102 certification from Microsoft. And it is called Get Started with Prompt Flow to Develop Language Model Apps in the Azure AI Foundry. So today we'll be taking a look at what prompt flow apparently is and what we can use it for. So let's take a look. First things first, the true power of large language models lies in their application. Whether you want to use LLMs to classify web pages into categories or to build a chatbot on your data. To harness the power of the LLMs available, you need to create an application that combines your data sources with LLMs and generates the desired output. So, develop, test, and deploy LLM applications. You can use Prompt Flow, accessible in the Azure Machine Learning Studio and Azure AI Foundry portal. So apparently there is and that's pretty interesting. I wasn't aware that there was another separate studio just for machine learning. Yeah, apparently there is. That's good to know. Anyway, we'll focus here on the Azure AI Foundry part of the prompt flow thing. So it takes a prompt as input, and it is the set of it's the text, okay, but prompting it to generate output or perform a specific task. Okay, but what does it output then? For example, when you want to use a text generation model, might be a sentence or paragraph. Okay. The effectiveness of the prompt often depends on how well it conveys the user's intent and the desired outcome. And you can create flows, which are a sequence of actions or steps that are taken to achieve a specific task or functionality. So the flow apparently is the overall process that incorporates the interaction with the LLM to address a particular use case. And it encapsulates the entire journey from receiving input to generating output or performing a desired action. So this is still a bit abstract for me currently, but hopefully this will become a bit more clear in the next section here. What is the development life cycle of an LLM app? So as I said in some previous videos, my opinion is that most best practices that already have been tried and tested in software development also translate very well to AI applications, since at the end of the day, AI applications are also software. However, there are a couple of considerations, especially considering that AI is non-deterministic, which is to say that when you give the same AI and the same model and the same configuration the same prompt twice, you will get two different answers. So you can really predict the exact outcome. So in AI terms, usually we work with sort of a threshold of how acceptable the answer is or the action is for our use case. Sort of evaluate what the AI is doing. So this is the life cycle of an application. So maybe let's see, first we define the use case and design, then experiment with a small data set. Then we assess the flow with a larger data set, and then this goes to production. Very important thing to note, this is a cycle. It's not a linear thing, but rather this all of these three steps here at the bottom, and even the first one, they sort of loop back around to each other. Because when you go to production, then you sort of start noticing other use cases for the AI or start monitoring sort of edge cases that the AI doesn't really know how to handle. So in that case, then you can use the experimentation step. So initialization can design and develop an LLM application to classify news articles. Okay, so this is pretty much just a simple, yeah, those are some examples of all of these steps, but I think it's pretty clear what we have here. And this is sort of a clearer picture of the whole life cycle. Yeah, I believe that This is very similar to software. If you wanted to create a very similar diagram for software, you could very easily do it. So you can just skip ahead and let's understand the car components and explore the flow types. So what is a flow? As an input, a couple of nodes and an output. So pretty sure that the tools are going to be the most important part here that we are going to need to learn. But the prompt can be different data types like strings, integers, or boolean, and the output represents the data produced by the flow. So maybe still miss a bit of a more concrete example here. So let's take a look if we have that. The tools available in prompt flow. So we have LLM2, which can create a custom prompt using an LLM. We can execute a custom Python script. You can prepare prompts for complex scenarios. And each tool is an executable unit. You can use these tools to perform tasks, much like AI agents do nowadays. What else? What else? The different types of flows. Let's see. There's the standard one, which is for LLM-based application development, chat flow, which is for chat-related applications, and evaluation flow, which is on performance evaluation, which I spent a bit of time talking about in the last video, which are very equivalent to unit tests, but don't really think about evaluations as too much like unit tests, but they solve the same sort of issue that they solve as well. Connections and runtime. So the connections can create a link between prompt flow and external services. So in the example here, we have Azure OpenAI and cognitive search. The connection stores the endpoint API key or credentials, and any necessary secrets aren't exposed to users, but instead are stored in an Azure Key Vault. So maybe this creates a key vault under the hood. There are certain built-in tools, such as Azure OpenAI, OpenAI without Azure, a search SERP, which I'm not sure what it is. Maybe let's take a look. Yeah, those are only very specific things from Brazil here. But it's probably a similar AI environment. And custom, which is the Python, uses the Python tools. Okay, the runtimes for prompt flow are a combination of a compute instance, which I imagine is the 2 here. Here it has a bit of a legend. Not a legend, it's a label. Providing the necessary compute resources in an environment, which is the 3. Specifying the necessary packages and libraries that need to be installed before being able to run the flow. When you use runtimes, you have a controlled environment where flows can be run and validated. Yeah, okay, that looks simple enough, because this probably abstracts the necessary packages you need for Python, for example, or excuse me, for maybe specific LLM functionality. I'm not sure. Variants and monitoring options. During production, you want to optimize and deploy your flow, and you also want to monitor your flows to understand when improving them is necessary. You can use variants, and you can monitor by evaluating key metrics. So what are variants? They are versions of a tool with distinct settings. They are only supported in the LLM tool. So you can use the same tool, but can have variants with different adjusted prompts or connection strings. So maybe one connection to a production instance and other for a test instance, for example, apparently. And we can allow users to customize their approach for specific tasks. Can use variants to enhance the quality of LLM generation, because we can use a bit of a scientific method to understand which variation or variant rather performs best. Save time and effort because we can compare different prompt versions. Yeah, pretty much very heavily used for side by side comparisons between different prompts or different environments, maybe. And then we can deploy the flow to an endpoint, which is pretty much a URL when you can make an API call to, and the flow will be triggered probably. Generates a URL and a key. When you invoke the endpoint, a flow is run and the output is returned in real time. As a result, deploying flows to endpoints can, for example, generate chat or agentic responses that you want to return in another application. So maybe you have this existing application, but you still want to sprinkle in a tiny bit of AI into it. Maybe your boss wants to integrate AI into your application, for example. This seems to me like the most common use case, since it's not starting from scratch to use other tools in the AI ecosystem from Azure. So you just want to think in terms of API, so you already have a pro code solution, so maybe an application or an API written in Python or C# or whatever. And for that particular functionality of your application, want to trigger an AI flow that you can return back to the user. So this could be, as it says here, a chat functionality, or maybe an agentic functionality that maybe interacts with another application. So this pretty much just seems to me like a very bare bones setup to allow AI actions as endpoints, probably. Monitor evaluation metrics. Maybe let's also take a look into this. This is key to understanding the LLM application's performance. To understand whether it's meeting practical needs, you can collect end user feedback and assess the application's usefulness. Another approach is whether it's performing well by comparing LM predictions with expected or ground truth responses to gauge accuracy and relevance. Yep, it's crucial for keeping LLM's applications reliable and effective. Here are some key metrics. So groundedness, which is how much it's aligned with the input source or database. The relevant, which is how pertinent it is. Coherence, fluency, and similarity. I believe we also talked about these factors here in another course. And when it doesn't perform as expected, you need to revert back to experimentation to iteratively explore how to improve your flow. So this is a little bit of an exercise, which is another lab. And I believe this lab would be very interesting for us to do. Maybe let's just put a pin on that. Maybe we will sort of do a longer round of all of these labs that we are leaving to another point in time. For example, this one would be an example, right? Can create a new um, resource. This is access control, giving the what is this? This is a storage account, so maybe we are going to do some data, and we deploy the AI model here, creating the prompt flow. So here it is in build and customize. So the prompt flow here has a bunch of inputs, then the tools, and then the outputs, as we saw. And there are two inputs in the inputs pane here in this example, which is the chat and the user's question. The output pane has, what does it have here? There's an output to reflect the model's answer. So I'm not sure what if it shows up here in the screenshot, but maybe it doesn't. Yeah, okay. So this is the prompt field, input section. Okay, test the flow. So you have this prompt here, and you can have a little chat on the sidebar to start testing it. Then you deploy it to an endpoint. Apparently, you need to specify the virtual machine size. It's interesting because it seems to me like this is like for the aesthetics of this, it seems very much like it's going to be like a um camera here. It seems very much like an Azure function, for example, which is very much a key serverless construct in Azure. So I'm not sure why we really need to specify a specific virtual machine size. I'm not sure if it's going to always be on, but it's something to look out for. So this seems pretty intriguing. So maybe we'll eventually do this lab here. And this is the module assessment. Flow uses an LLM to generate text with the EGP 3.5 model. What do you need to create to ensure prompt flow can securely call the deploy model from Azure OpenAI? And this is going to be a connection because remember the connection is how we integrate the prompt flow application flow, I guess, to another external resource, in this case OpenAI. So this is the right answer. The runtime is where the prompt flow runs, and the tools are the actions it takes between getting the input and giving out the output. And to integrate it with an online website, what do you need to do to easily integrate your flow? You can deploy your flow to an endpoint, but you also need to create a runtime before that, I guess, and create a custom environment. I'm not sure what, maybe once you already have a runtime, maybe you want to create a custom environment to do some testing, probably. After deployment, you notice that your flow is underperforming. In which stage should you revert back to? This is a bit of a question about the first page that we sort of glossed over because it's very shallow, not really shallow, but things that are very familiar to us that have a software background. So if the flow is underperforming, then we can revert to the experimentation stage, at least in my opinion, because, and here is, I might be wrong on this one because I'm not entirely sure if this is the answer the question is expecting, but I would go back to the experimentation phase because when we have some monitoring that the application isn't really performing what we need, this means that we already have the monitoring in place to know if some experiment may work or not. So this is a very good opportunity for us to run more experiments and see which one sticks. So I'm going to submit my answers, and they're all correct, okay? And this is a summary of the module. So very good. Today we learned all of this, and here are a lot of interesting links here, even a Discord link apparently, which might be fun, but I'm not really interested in that. So let's just complete the module. And along with that, let's finish the video here. The next video we'll learn how to develop a RAG-based solution with my own data using AI Foundry. And I'll see you guys on that next video. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you have any topics or anything else you want to clear up or learn more about, you can also always comment it down below. So that's it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.